Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. Today is my last day in Maine, so I'm headed home. You can see I've got the car filled with all my goodies. But before I go, there's one thing that I have left to do. So I signed up for a dyeing class in the Shaker Village. By dyeing, I mean yarn dyeing, not actually dyeing in person. Otherwise, I couldn't use all this yarn. So yeah, I'm gonna spend some time doing that. And I mean, I don't have to make it all the way home to Philly today. I got a hotel room in Massachusetts. So I can take this trip in two things, which will honestly be better for me driving by myself, because about 6 hours is my limit before I start going mad when it comes to driving. They said to bring a sack lunch, so I'm going to go to Maine's equivalent, semi-equivalent of a Wawa. They only sell the sandwiches, they don't sell the other stuff. And get myself a sandwich from there. And then we're gonna head to the Shaker Village and start the dye class. I got my food for later. I also got a whoopie pie, which is a Maine delicacy, and some Gatorade for the dehydration purposes, or preventing dehydration. We don't want to become dehydrated. Anyway, now I gotta actually head to the Shaker Village and meet up with the people there. The dye class at Shaker Village was a lot of fun. So much fun. I had a grand time. I arrived with like 10 minutes early, but I was also the last one to arrive. It was a pretty small class. So there's probably about 7 of us total. So there were about 4 of us who were completely new to the process and who were the ones who were being taught to. So in addition to me, there was Sue, who has had previous experience working with fabric. She's dabbled in all sorts of different crafts throughout her life. And then there was Nathan and Elena, who traveled from California. Elena raises sheep for the 4-H project. So this was a different way for her to experience wool. And then there was the teacher, Marty. She also helps run the Wrinkle in Time farm and shop. And then there was also the artist in residence, Nina, and the wolf farmer at the Wrinkle in Time farm, Esther. So it's a nice cozy little group. And we were all under like this kind of tented patio. It's like the general tents you see outside when there's like a market or like a campground, just to provide just like shelter without actual sides to it. and there was a table in the middle, and the table was just covered in flowers. We were going to be making yellow, green, and blue colored things today with some orange thrown in because some of the yellows wandered over into orange territory. There were 5 different types of flowers, like 4 big main pots of flowers and then 1 little pot of flowers. We had Queen Anne's lace, coreopsis, marigolds, and goldenrod. The first part of the dye process had already been done for us, which was mordanting the fiber. So mordanting is used to help make the dye more color fast, makes the color stronger, and it prevents it from washing out when you wash it. That was done ahead of time. We each got a skein included with the workshop. We also had the option of bringing our own skeins to dye, which I was the only person who did so because I literally just came from the yarn cruise. So there were a couple skeins I got that were like off-white, beige-ish. I didn't know how they were going to work. I meant to take the skein that was in a cake and turn it into a hank, and I was too lazy to do so, so I had brought a cake. That was 100% cotton. And there was another one that was 100% cotton, brand unknown. And then I brought an alpaca one, but the alpaca one was commercially bleached. Marty did warn me that with the harsher bleaches, when it's commercially bleached like that, it's less likely to hold the color, which was true. It did end up being true. It did hold color though. And she's like, if you're still willing to try it out, we can do a little experiment here, see what it looks like. And I was like, yeah, I mean, why not? Because honestly, if you're going to have a dyeing class, you're going to want to try all the different dyes, right? Like, why just stop at one? Why not have more fun? Yeah. We ended up like labeling our different yarns. We had like the little wristbands that you often get at a concert, or like that lets you into like places. And we wrote our names on them, and we just put them in the water and we let it soak. And then we had to cut up the flowers. There were only 2 pairs of scissors at first, but there were more than 2 of us. So we were originally told there was only 2 at a time. But then I just got bored and I just started ripping it with my hands. It's like, it works just as well, right? And they ended up finding more scissors after that. But we cut them into like about 2-inch pieces-ish. With the exception of the marigolds, we dyed all the flower. So we dyed like the stems, the leaves, in addition to the flower part. And that contributed to the overall color. As far as I know, it didn't make it more green. Some of the yellows were a bit greenish. We threw it into a big pot of water, like a huge like spaghetti pot, metal spaghetti pot, and we had some propane stoves. So we got the propane stoves going and we had to heat up the water to try to soak the color out of the flowers. I forgot if I mentioned that there were dahlias. There were a lot less dahlias and they were in a smaller pot, but there was yarn dyed with the dahlia color. That is the only flower in which I did not get any dye from. When we were waiting for that to seep, like they went over the little pamphlet that they gave us this nice handy worksheet or pamphlet of information about how to dye, which is good because I wouldn't remember all the specifics. I did find it kind of hard to focus on it on the paper while we were outdoors anyway, because it was a beautiful sunny day. Like, we had the tools. That was more interesting. Like, while we were waiting for the water to steep and like to boil it to, well, we didn't quite bring it to a boil. We only bring it up to a simmer, because if you put wool in boiling water, it ends up felting it, and we don't want the wool to felt unless we want it to felt. That's how wool shrinks. But we ended up going on a little tiny walk around the Shaker Village. We ended up cutting some flowers off, some clippings of flowers. We did see a thistle. We didn't touch the thistle because it was prickly. We saw a hollyhock. There was one flower we didn't know how it would dye. I attempted to pull it up. I ended up pulling it by the root. And it's like, yeah, we don't need this much of the flower. So I like quickly replanted it back in, and I just snipped a little bit of it off once I got the scissors. I don't think we ended up using any of those flowers. I think they probably saved them for use of their own. When we came back, we ended up starting to make the indigo, because how you get the green is you mix the yellow with the blue, and that gives you the green when in certain amounts. So we had to mix the indigo to get it set. Unlike the flowers, which was just like fresh stuff that we boiled down ourselves, the indigo was a pre-reduced dye, so it kind of looked like blue charcoal. And you mix it with thiourea. Yeah, we used thiourea dioxide. I'm going to put it down here. And soda ash, I think. Yes, soda ash. We had to dissolve the soda ash in boiling water. And it does leave like a purple film on top. But the purple film doesn't really affect the dye so much, as far as I know. And we had to let that ferment for a little bit. And that's when we had lunch. It's like, hey, are we good for a meal? It's like, yeah, we can have a meal. So we were told to bring a sack lunch. And I had my sandwich. I had half of my sandwich. I had the other half later because when I came to the hotel room, it literally just poured. And it's like, I don't want to go out in this. I'll just have the other half of the sandwich, even though it might not be that great because it's been out in the sun for a little bit. But I seem to be fine. So knock on wood. With that, like, we started checking like how the various yarns were colored. So the first one that was prepared was the coreopsis. And both me and Nathan, who was really invested in getting a good green, both put it in the coreopsis to try to get that green. And I put in my cotton cake. Although when he pulled out his wool yarn, it was this most vibrant orange. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that orange. But I was going to leave my cotton in there longer because the cotton seemed to be reacting differently and I was hoping for like a more deeper orange. I also knew with the cake it was probably going to be variegated because the outside part was going to be darker than the inside part. And then after that, Nina was kind of showing how the different processes were prepared. So Nina was the one who showed off how to prepare the indigo. She strained the first dye. So with the coreopsis and the marigold, we took time to strain the dyes to get rid of the extra flowers before we used the dye. With the Queen Anne's lace and the goldenrod, we didn't really care. We just put it straight in, which means we have some flower bits in those yarns. But it's all good, right? I put my alpaca skein in the marigold. I didn't know how it was going to look, but it turned out it was already like somewhat sort of tied, and it took a while to kind of get the color that I wanted, but there came a point where the alpaca didn't seem to absorb anymore. It left a very pale yellow, which actually Esther really admired. She was trying to get that pale yellow for herself, but it wasn't quite working, so I'm going to be sending some of that to her later. I think Queen Anne's lace was the next one that we tried. The goldenrod took the longest to go down, and Nina was the one who put her skein in like 3 different yellows. So she started with the dahlia, and then I think she put hers in the marigold after that, and then she might put it in the Queen Anne's lace. But I put my wool skein in the Queen Anne's lace because I wanted like a light yellow. Like the coreopsis produced this orangey color, and marigold produced like this other like yellow orange. So I also wanted some pale yellow. So I did that with the Queen Anne's lace, although the Queen Anne's lace was also a bit greenish, comparatively speaking. And with that, it's like, well, I got the cotton skein left. I'm going to save that for the indigo because I just want a straight indigo. Then around this point, we started soaking the other like skeins that we had hanging, and Marty gladly sold them to us because Nathan was trying to get a green, and he wouldn't have been able to get the green that he wanted with the orange, although he could get like a green orange mix, but he was also just wanting to get like a closer to a green, so he needed a lighter yellow for that, which meant a different skein. But also, like, I realized if I bought another skein I could get the goldenrod, so I did that. I think Sue was trying to play with some yellows as well. Sue was trying to play around with some yellows, and while we were playing with the different yellows, then Nina prepared the iron. The iron is what's considered a modifier. So after you dye the yarn, you can dip the yarn in a different chemical that changes the color of the dye that's on it, which is called a modifier. So Nina dipped the marigold into the iron the iron mixture, and it was a subtle change. Like, you could see the difference there, but it wasn't quite there. I wanted to try this out. So I got my goldenrod, and I brought my goldenrod over to it. And that was the most drastic one there was. The top half that wasn't in the modifier was still yellow, but the bottom half was this dark green. I dipped it in like 3 times. It got a little bit darker each time. Especially after it dried, it was beautiful. Nathan was curious and trying to get a green from the modifier with the orange. So he ended up getting another skein with the coreopsis, and he dipped it in the modifier. And when he pulled it out, like, we're all expecting this dramatic transformation. Everyone else is staring at this as it's going on. And he pulls it out, and very subtle. It was kind of anticlimactic. It was not what we were expecting to do. It took this orangey color and it made it browner, like more muted. Gave it like this brown overtone. Shortly after that, we did the indigo. Like, Nina did the first indigo one to show how to do it. And it turns out when it goes into the indigo, when it comes out, like, it's supposed to look like yellow. It's already supposed to look green, even if you just do it straight with like a straight skein. And then it turns blue after you rinse it. And as it gets to oxidize with the air, it turns more and more blue. Which is an interesting way that the chemicals work. I dipped my entire indigo skein, like my entire cotton skein, into the indigo. I got this absolutely gorgeous blue color. Although it's kind of mixed, like some of it's bluer than the others. I dipped it in several times. Nathan tried to indigo dip his one that he put in the iron oxide, and he got a purple. He got like this purple grayish color, which I didn't realize we could get purple from these colors. It was amazing. It was amazing enough that I ended up trying it out later. And then Elena was also looking forward to the indigo because she was wanting a yellow-green mix. So she wanted like a yellow mix with like part of it being green. And hers turned out lovely. Hers was beautiful. I think she did it with a goldenrod. Yeah, I think she was waiting for the goldenrod. And then she dipped it in the indigo. Like she dipped it in the rinse first so she could actually get a light green. And then she dipped it in the indigo. So it started having a gradiated effect. And that was pretty cool. I did that with my Queen's Anne's lace. I ended up just dipping it straight into the indigo, like halfway, because I also wanted a yellow-green mix. That ended up working out pretty nicely. Marty had a skein that was labeled as hers, but Nina ended up dyeing it for her. Marty's was just soaking straight in the dahlia color. Then all of it was dipped into the iron mix. Out came like this absolutely gorgeous green. It was like this nice mossy green. And then we had one skein left. Esther's like, well, does someone want to use the skein? And I was like, you know what? I'll do something with it. Because I actually liked how, like, Nathan ended up completely dyeing his, like, orange iron oxide skein completely into the indigo and then into the iron mordant, and it ended up looking like this grayish purple completely. But I liked how it looked before with the orange and the blue. So I attempted to recreate it. Mine did not look the same. Natural dyes are magically unpredictable. Chasing after that orange again. So I ended up dyeing it in the Coreopsis, and then I put half of it into the iron mixture, and then I flipped it in half, so half of the iron mixture and half of the non-iron mixture got put into the indigo, and I dipped that a couple times, and that yarn turned out really beautiful. Oh yeah, the reason why I'm not showing the yarns right at this moment is because they have to soak, they have to like seep overnight in their own goodness of dye before they get rinsed out, so the colors stay nice and vibrant, which is pretty typical for dyes. The same thing happens with tie-dye too. Since it happened earlier today and I'm in a hotel room, I'm not going to deal with that mess until I get home. So it turns out when I get home, I have to rinse it out. The indigo stuff has to be put in vinegar water. That helps deal with the color fastness of the indigo in order to make sure that it doesn't rub off on me when I'm trying to knit. I am kind of worried about the colors bleeding into each other too much, like the stronger colors overpowering some of the lighter colors. We'll have to see what the damage is when it all comes down. I'm really hoping that pale orange stayed. Yeah, I ended up leaving with 6 skeins. I came with 3. I'm a yarn goddess. I just magically accumulate yarn. Towards the end, like Nina and Esther were helping Marty to clean up. They were actually saving the dyes. Esther was actually seriously looking for jars to get the indigo because she didn't want to waste the indigo dye, because otherwise we would have just had to dump it in the grass, and dye lasts for a very, very long time. So they probably had a very careful trip home back to a Wrinkle in Time farm, because where we had the dye class was not the farm where the store is. Like, it's the Shaker Village. I don't know too much about them, but they are a community that lives a way more conservative lifestyle that I personally would want to live, but good on them for trying to live it. Yeah, it's a very beautiful place. Very calm place. I ended up seeing some sheep on the way out. I'm very glad I had that experience. Thank you very much to Marty for telling me about it when I visited her store on the main yarn cruise, because I wouldn't have even thought about going otherwise. It was like, this was too good an opportunity to pass up. I'm not quite at the end of the video because I have the yarn show off portion left, but I will be leaving the information for A Wrinkle in Time farm and the Shaker Village down in the description box below, so if you want to check them out for yourself, please do. Here's the moment you've all been waiting for. I'm going to show off all the pretty yarn now. It's been over a week since I've gotten back, maybe closer to 2 weeks at this point. I'm not sure, but I've had a chance to rinse the yarn, I've had a chance to let it dry, and I still have it in hang, so I've just got to wind it up. But I didn't want to wind it up till I showed it off, because it'd be a lot easier to show off the differences in this format than when it gets caked up. I think about the best way to do this, it might be in the order that I dyed it, maybe? I might be able to remember, I'm not sure. This was the first one. Wow, this is now a freaking mess. Anyway, this was a cake. It is no longer a cake. but this was in the coreopsis, and I put it in when it was in the cake form. So you can see this part is a bit darker than this part right here, because this was on the outside of the cake and that was on the inside. So obviously the part that was on the outside had more. To be fair, if I hadn't dyed this yarn, I would find it more boring than I do. But I do like the nice gradation effect. It does feel super nice. This was the yarn from Nessencott Farms, the cotton cake. Like, one of the other people ended up getting this nice vibrant orange, and I was chasing after, but it was interesting to see how the different colors were affected. And then this right here is the alpaca yarn. And this was the marigold. It looks blander on screen than it does in person, but it's a nice yellow. I had it in there for a really long time because it was commercially bleached before I got it. I think that probably affected how well it absorbed it. I actually did find, like, the alpaca that said it was friendly to dyeing afterwards. I'm thinking I'm probably gonna save that one for a chance to dye in the future to see how it affects. But it feels pretty nice now. It did not feel great while wet. Yeah, it turned out pretty nice. This here is the goldenrod. So this right here was the goldenrod before it was dyed, and then I dipped the goldenrod in an iron modifier, and out of the different colors, this had the most drastic effect. A lot of them you just dipped it in and it's like it barely changed, but the goldenrod, you put it in and it just turned it this vivid green. Well, vivid's not really a color I typically associate with this thing. Usually this is more like a earthy type of green, but the color change was vivid. And I dipped it in a couple times. It might end up a little bit lighter here than it does all the way down here. That was on purpose. And it looks like some of it did bleed a little bit, but adds character, adds character. And then this here is the Queen's Anne's lace, which might be my favorite of the yellows. And then the bottom was dip dyed in indigo. Ooh, it's showing up on screen really nicely. I tried to mimic one of the other people's gradated look. So when I did that, like, you can actually see this is lighter than this. So what I did was I dipped it half of the way into the dye. And then when I re-dipped it, I dipped it in only that way, which is why you can see that. And I think I did it a third time just for like maybe the little bottom tip. But that one's a bit harder to see. If it has absorbed a lot of the dye ended up washing out because I tried to wash it out before I soaked it in the vinegar water, which took out a lot of the dye. But then when I put it in the vinegar, it was running clear. This is the wool. The goldenrod was also the wool provided by a Wrinkle in Time farm. And then this is the other cotton. The mystery cotton, as it were. Didn't know the brand, but I just straight dipped this in the indigo because I love a good blue. And the cotton took longer to dry than the wool. Probably because wool is very good at wicking water away and like being warm while wet, while cotton not so great. But I love this color. When I had dyed it, part of it had looked green, but as Marty told me, it would fade to blue over time, which it has. As I'm looking, as part of it's appearing on the screen now, it does seem a little bit splotchy. I'm okay with that though. And then here's the little fun experiment skein. This is the wool. So this was meant to be 4 different colors. Ooh. I hold it here. Yeah. Wow, this shows a lot more vibrantly on the screen than it does in person. So I dipped the whole yarn in coreopsis. So this is just straight coreopsis right here, which it appears a lot lighter than I was expecting it to be. But it's still a nice orangey thing, although it kind of looks yellowish. I don't know. But then I dipped half of it in the iron modifier. So this right here is the iron modifier in the coreopsis. You can see it's a brownish sort of color. And then I split it in half the other way, and I dipped the other half in indigo. So this right here is the indigo and the coreopsis. Then this right here is the coreopsis indigo with the iron modifier. So I've got like a nice artistic looking skein. It's a smaller skein, but that could work up into something unique. I just have to figure out what that thing is. Yeah, those were the yarns that I ended up dyeing at the Shaker farm. And even though I'm not really in a position to continue dyeing right at this moment, even though I kind of have a sense of what I would need, I am in a position where it's something I want to research more. So I've got some resources that I can start looking up. I'm very happy with all the dyed yarn that I have now. That was today's entertainment. Have a nice day.